It's a drizzly Sunday afternoon, and with it, another episode of Coffee Break. Today we'll be discussing some ethical questions that we personally found interesting, and that we came up with yesterday. I'm Kevin.
Okay.
What the hell, Kevin?
Didn't you just say I'm Kevin? What the fuck?
I wanted to see how you'd respond to that.
I was like, wait a second here.
Alright. Well, I'm your host, Roland.
And I'm Kevin.
Okay, there we go. And yeah, like I said, today we're going to be discussing some ethical qualms that we personally found intriguing. And before we get into all that, we'll have a quick segment about what coffee we're drinking, because honestly, I'm still drinking the same stuff. I'm drinking some. Well, actually, here's a quick change for you. I started grinding I started grinding my beans on the espresso setting, and then I would put it in the drip machine, so it's really fine.
Okay.
And it comes out really, really nice. Would recommend. I know you don't have.
What is like the big difference between between that and what you were doing before?
Well, before I was grinding it on what is like the recommended drip setting, which is like much more granular, much bigger pieces that come out of the grinder, and it comes out just fine like that. It just isn't as I should say robust, and that's the main difference. So with the espresso grind in the drip machine, it's a lot more robust and very, very smooth. So it just makes for a really nice, dark, rich cup of coffee in the morning, which is if you're not into, then you shouldn't do it. But I love really strong coffee in the mornings, and this makes it, that gives you that extra oomph.
Now, do you use like the same amount of beans like for every cup, or do you use like more or less, or how does that change when you make a cup of coffee every day?
That's a good question. So I recently replaced my hopper. I had this really big, ugly hopper that comes standard with all the Baratza grinders. I hate it. I hate that one. No offense, Baratza. Still looking for a sponsorship, but I hate your hoppers. So what I ended up having to do was I actually got a 3D printed hopper from Etsy. And it's a single dose hopper. So what I usually do is I fill that up.
There you go.
Yeah, I fill that up most of the time, like usually all the way up, or roughly all the way up, I should say. And that comes out just the right amount of beans for my morning cup.
Okay, so that's just like a 1 cup. Like you have to do that every time you want like a single cup, yeah?
Yeah, my cups are bigger. It's not like an actual single cup. It's like a it's 2 standard cups.
Yeah. I got you. Okay. Well, I'm drinking something that the viewers might disagree with. I have another smoothie today. Not coffee.
Oh my god. You didn't put coffee in there?
I should have. No, I just didn't feel like coffee as much. I didn't feel like it, so I decided to make myself a smoothie.
Is that what you're doing for 30 minutes before?
Yeah, I was blending it up, all that good stuff. Now we got this awesome smoothie. It's fantastic. Smoothies hit different sometimes.
Smoothies are great. I usually have one after I exercise. So
yeah, I put like protein in mine, so it's like really, really filling too. Nice.
Very nice. All right. Well, even though you're blasphemous and probably shouldn't be here right now, but we'll accept you for what you are. A coffee heretic. But yeah, let's get into today's discussion. So I'll bring up the first point of today, and something that we can discuss briefly. Private businesses, should they be allowed, or should they continue to have the right to not serve customers that they may not agree with either religiously or morally? And this is in relation to the situation that occurred when, just as an example, when a private bakery wanted to that does wedding cakes, a gay couple came to them and asked for, you know, a wedding cake for their wedding, and the bakery refused them service because they were homosexual. Should that be allowed?
I think it's a really big back and forth here. I think that there's obviously certain cases that shouldn't be allowed and certain cases that should be. Overall, though, I think that whatever private business it is should be able to dictate who their customers are, and they have the right to refuse service to anybody that they choose, as like a whole answer. But of course, you're gonna have specific cases that are just, you know, out there and wrong. What do you think?
Well, I feel like there has to be more identifying questions for this kind of situation. So, for example, do you think private businesses should be able to refuse service based off of race?
Race? No, I completely disagree with that.
Right. And that's a law, from what I understand.
I mean, I think there's certain things that are like, you know, race, religion, as long as like it's, go ahead.
So to that point, we have to draw a line of delineation, right?
Sure.
Of what should be allowed and what shouldn't be allowed. And you brought up religion, but in the context of the example I gave, the owners refused service for religious reasons.
Interesting. Okay.
And that was upheld in court.
So it stood up in court, is what you're saying?
Yeah. Yep. They it went to this. I don't remember exactly which court it went to. It might have hit the Supreme Court, but it was upheld as totally fine to do. And I remember reading in the news shortly after that same store put up some more signs that were basically saying if you're homosexual, I will not serve you.
What were the religious reasons?
Well, he was Christian, so religiously, in the Bible, Christians are not allowed, or should not, what's the word I'm looking for, approve of homosexuality. They should not condone it, blah, 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 blah. And I know a lot of Christians don't actually believe that, but by the book, that's what you're supposed to believe.
Okay.
And so some people use that as a weapon to discriminate against people, obviously. So that's the case here. And because, America has some pretty strong religious freedom laws, which is great, it also fell under that belt of, well, because of his religious freedom, he's allowed to do this. So what do you think where do you think the line should be drawn for this kind of discrimination?
Oh, it's so hard to say. I mean, there's so many different factors that play into this because, like, on one hand, like, I don't want people to be discriminated based on like their religious beliefs or their, if their, their relationship status or however they feel. Like at the end of the day, I'd want it to be like fair, but I don't want the extremities, where if somebody's coming in, spewing like religious propaganda, bothering other customers with it, like that kind of, would set me off, and like that's a hard no for me. But in the same sense, if two homosexuals, want to have their wedding cake there, I don't see like the harm in it at the same time.
Yeah, you don't, right? But if you were bound by a set of principles, and your belief system dictates that you are not allowed to condone this kind of existence.
I guess then, like in that case, I can see why whatever court sided with them on that particular issue, because if that's the way they felt, and or that's the way they were upholding their religious beliefs as a private business, then I guess that's the way it fell.
Yeah, and I feel like I need to make a quick disclaimer here. While you might hear me talking about certain things that you may not agree with or anything like that, just to make it clear, I'm trying to separate my personal beliefs from the conversation when I'm discussing these ethical dilemmas. I'll make my personal beliefs known, I guess, and for each subject. Personally, I think I don't agree with discrimination based off your religion or anyone's religion. I think it's silly, but it's not my place to make that final judgment. It's for the courts. So, but just to make that clear, you'll hear me saying some things that I personally don't even agree with, but that's just to make the conversation move along and kind of explore the different branches of what we're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, there's two sides to every story here, right? Like it can go either way with a lot of these types of things, and they don't necessarily reflect our personal like opinions towards that kind of whatever the topic is. Yeah.
So quick disclaimer there, but on top of that, so this actually plays a role into what we were talking about last week, and that is the vaccination passports.
Right.
That example was brought up last week as well. So the right to discriminate for private businesses, I think, is justified. Personally, I feel like things that you can control, you should not be able to discriminate, or you should be able to discriminate, sorry. If you can control the reasons for discrimination, private businesses should be able to discriminate.
Can you give me an example of that?
Yeah, a perfect example is being vaccinated. You can control whether you will be vaccinated or you will not be vaccinated. If it is out of your control for any reason,
okay.
Let's say you have actual valid medical reason for not getting vaccinated, supplying proof of that should be enough to avoid that kind of discrimination.
I think one of the other things that I've heard recently as well about that is the lack of vaccines that some places have. How do you feel about a business in a country that has, an inadequate supply of vaccines, not letting unvaccinated people into their business?
For most of these examples, I am purely talking about the United States.
Okay,
it's really hard.
We're sticking with the U.S. Okay. It's
very hard to take into consideration because the laws here. I'm thinking of the laws here. It's very difficult to address especially when it comes to vaccines, for example, but the state of other countries as well as the United States, because they're so different in a lot of ways. Because you're right. Even then, if we do branch out into the other countries, it's still, I think, up to the country or to those private businesses to determine if it makes sense to discriminate against people who are unvaccinated. In places where the vaccines are not readily available, you can't go down the street and get one. It probably doesn't make much financial sense to do that.
Yeah. I agree with that. It's I It's it's kind of getting to the point. Not to branch off to another topic with the vaccines, because that's a whole world of things we could talk about there. But it's so crazy to see people just that are unvaccinated at this point. It blows my mind with every day that I see somebody that isn't, or meet somebody that isn't vaccinated at this point.
Yeah, I don't meet too many new people on a daily basis, but it is surprising to me when I see maybe some people I'm following on Instagram or Twitter, they end up just now getting their vaccine. That surprises me because I'm like, oh wow, you haven't gotten your vaccine yet. It's been months, like what is makes me curious. Like I wonder why.
The reasoning.
Yeah, like were you just being? Do you have like an actual reason? Because hey, I get it. The things happen. Or were you just being lazy? And if you're being lazy, that's one thing, but that's a choice you're making. Sure. And if that's a choice that you decide to make, bringing it back to the actual topic, you should face the consequences for something like that. You should, in my opinion, I think businesses should have the right to say, no, you cannot come in, you can't shop here, you can't eat here if you don't have proof of vaccination. Because now you're a threat, not only to the workers, but to the other patrons. So that's where my opinion lies. Where if you can control the reason for discrimination, then, and obviously that is a gray area because there's stupid things that people can discriminate against that people do have control over. Like if your hair is too short, that's pretty dumb.
Oh my god.
But when it comes to more, but I do think that should be the limit there. Obviously for religions of race or religion, that's where it gets really dicey. Race not so much, but religion, yeah, because realistically you do have the choice of your religion, but usually it's so ingrained in people that they feel like they don't. And
yeah, it's definitely a back and forth one, with when it comes to religion. I mean, that's with so many different types of things. It's not just private business, right? The right not to serve customers in private businesses, but that's anywhere. I mean, I feel like religion just sparks controversy no matter where in the world you go.
Which is sad, because it's supposed to be the opposite. But that's the reality. That's for sure. Anyway, yeah, those are my thoughts on that kind of. That question there, where what right do private businesses have to not serve customers and to serve customers depending on their beliefs or whatever. So ultimately, I do think private businesses should be able to choose who spends time at their place of business and who doesn't.
So just to take one step back on that though, do you think if there was a hit all, would you rather have it that they can just completely control who their visits their store, or not at all? Let the government dictate.
Yeah. That's a good question. Ultimately, I do think private businesses should have the full right to not serve customers, because that is in the true spirit of capitalism. And while I'm not a huge capitalism fan, that is our kind of, that is what we follow now. And in that spirit, yeah, businesses should have the right to not serve customers, because I can imagine a situation where I have someone who's being, and the opposite end of the spectrum, right? Someone who enters my place of business being racist or bigoted or anything, and I don't have the right to kick them out. That's not cool. That would be crushing. So to preserve that right, I would, accept the fact that any business can discriminate against me for stupid reasons, but that just means that the businesses that don't will have my business, and those will probably end up succeeding more in the long term because I'm not bigotry and hatred like that don't last very long.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think I'd rather, like, as a hit all, give it to private businesses to choose who their customers can be, and if that was the case. But of course, there's always like gray areas, as you mentioned, when it comes to these kind of things, and it's just the way it is sometimes, and that's why it goes so high up in the courts when you do have a case like that with refusal for such a hot topic nowadays.
Yep.
Anyways, let's move on a little bit. So did you ever cheat in school, Roland?
No.
Never cheated once, never borrowed your teacher's test answer sheet?
You might be surprised to hear this, but no, I actually never did. And I was actually very adamantly against it.
I'm honestly not surprised.
Yep.
So do you overall disagree with cheating in school, or how do you feel about it?
My thoughts on it
cases...
my thoughts on it have evolved.
Okay.
But truthfully, it's more of like it's a personal doctrine of mine to have never cheated in school. And there are a lot of stories and examples I can give, and maybe I'll go through some of them, but I never cheated in school because I knew it wasn't the right thing to do. But when I saw other people cheating in school, it didn't bother me because I kind of understood where they were coming from. And at the same time, when you get into college, which, by the way, newsflash, college is just a big cheating circle, for the most part.
Cheating gang.
Yeah, I didn't participate in cheating in college either, but it's one of those things that you understand why people do it the more ridiculous the classes get. So
I have a different opinion than you do when it comes to cheating. I get that yours has evolved, but I think that it is okay in some cases, actually.
Well, what do you define as okay?
So I think that there's definitely if you cheat in like this, like in some regard, it is a moral dilemma. But for me, the way I thought about it in school was, if it wasn't something that was going to determine what you did in the future, like if it was like a class in, all hypothetical, by the way. If it wasn't like a class in like college per se that was going to determine your major, so if you're taking that English 2 class you don't give a shit about and isn't going to determine your life, like why not get at least a passing grade in that class when you can focus on other things that will determine more of your future?
Right. And I think that's the general sentiment when cheating at any point. I don't think there's really another reason that people cheat in academics.
Well, I mean, you see cases where people cheat on like some classes in their major, and I just think they're screwing themselves like long term, because if you graduate with a degree you didn't really earn in those classes like there's just some things that I disagree with it in that standpoint.
Well, why? What if they've determined that they're not going to use that content in their jobs?
I guess that's true. I guess it I guess it depends on like, what the class is, and if they've determined that it's not going to affect their class, then yeah, sure, why not?
So let's say a student has determined that every class in college will not affect the way they can do their jobs. Is cheating still ethical?
Fuck it. Yeah, probably. It's probably like not. At the end of the day, if it's not gonna affect your future, I'd probably side with it. Like if all you need is that piece of paper and it's not has nothing to do with your job and safety of others, and it's really not gonna affect anybody.
That's what they think. That's what the college student thinks. Right. The point of the piece of paper is to certify that you have at least done this work. And to avoid doing the work, to cheat through it, means you are forging that certification. This is how I look at it. This is how I look at every form of cheating. If you cheat, you're lying. You're lying to yourself, and you're lying to anyone who thought you actually did something. That's the reality, in my opinion. And that's why I never cheated. I never wanted there to be questions on whether I actually did something or I didn't do something. And this is how I look at a lot of other of my peers. And this is why I think college is a joke in most of public education. Because cheating is so prolific in our education system.
It's everywhere. It's fucking everywhere.
The piece of paper, like Kevin was just talking about, it doesn't mean anything because you have no idea what that student actually did. It serves no purpose anymore.
It's one of the that piece of paper, that diploma. It stands. I think that when I saw it for the first time, I was like, cool. I never want to see this thing again. Like it doesn't define who I am as a person. That's how I always saw my diploma. So I didn't really care too much for it.
All right.
I think it serves such a low boundary nowadays. Like it's such a bottom stepping stone that it's like it really doesn't make a big difference in people's futures nowadays. Like there's just so many other ways.
Well, it does, right? Because people are spending tens of thousands of dollars getting that piece of paper, and for what? To cheat through their courses, to gain no actual knowledge, and to get a job that they probably don't like. That's the reality of the situation. Paper does just mean that you're in debt, usually. For those who don't know, I dropped out of college. I thought the whole thing was pretty stupid after this first or second year. I think second year. Especially realizing how many people cheated. There was no value, because what ends up happening, especially, and I think people, they don't realize this, when this idea that cheating is okay and that cheating is acceptable in education, it becomes so prolific and prevalent, it also starts affecting the coursework, and it affects the people that don't cheat, because now the coursework is getting inflated, and to the point where the people who don't cheat are at such a severe disadvantage that it makes it unbearable to actually go through school. So when you're sitting there as someone who is trying their best not to cheat and going through this grueling coursework of 50, 100 questions every other night just to turn in, there are so many few options there that you just feel like you're drowning. And for what? Like Kevin was saying, for a piece of paper at the end of 4 years, that really means nothing. And people really don't care about it as much anymore.
It's just everyone has one nowadays. It's like that piece of paper. It doesn't really hold as much as it used to. At least that's how I see it. And I think that there are certain. I still going back to the just cheating in general. I think that in some cases it is okay. I think that it is okay to prioritize other things and let it get away. But of course, you have to draw a line with anything. I think that if you get to the point where you're cheating all the time, and you're just relying on that to pass classes, and you're letting it, like, why are you even at school at that point? Like, why are you even in school? You know what I mean? Like, it's like, why
Yeah.
show up? Why show up to forge answers, and you're not even learning anything at that point.
Right. And the people who cheat, in my opinion, they follow the same ideology of it's a means to an end, right? That's exactly how they see it. In my opinion, the means matter just as much as the end result. So rather than cheating, and I'm not trying to make it seem like I was a beacon of morality here when I've dropped out. No, I dropped out because I hated. I dropped out because I hated college.
That's a different story.
Yeah,
I mean,
but but I would have rather dropped out and not go through this whole facade of caring about my degree and cheating my way through a degree than continuing to doing that or just dropping out. That's a big reason why I dropped out. I could not do that, especially with how I was raised and how I went through middle school and high school. People would ask me for my test papers. People would ask me for my homework. One of my best friends, Michael, actually, the way we met and the way we actually first started talking is he asked me for my homework in math class, and I told him no. And
what
then,
a nerd, dude.
Yeah, this was in freshman year of high school, and I said, no, I actually don't do that. And
he probably gave you such a look of surprise, like, what?
He was surprised, but he also very much respected my choice. He wasn't a dick about it at all. He understood, which is why we actually became very good friends. He wasn't, some people would, when I tell them that answer, like, hey, can I get your homework? I'd be like, no. It's like, oh, well, you're like, why are you making such a big deal out of it? Blah, 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 blah. People don't respect, your own morals, in that regard. So, but Michael did. Anyway, point is, I don't think cheating is ethical because it affects the people who don't want to cheat. If it only affected you, fine. It's still not ethical in my opinion. Is it acceptable? I guess. You're still lying. So in that regard, it's not moral or ethical, in my opinion. But I understand that you might see it as a requirement, as you needing to do it to get where you want. Well, I think that's not true. You can get wherever you need to get without having to make those kind of sacrifices. I understand why you might, trick yourself into thinking that, because that's what you've been told your entire life.
So I have a story I want to share. This is a very interesting scenario. I just want to hear your thoughts on it, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So back in high school, I had a Greek mythology class, okay?
Okay.
And I cheated on one of the tests. I didn't study, and I think the teacher was out of the room, and somebody told on me that I had my phone out or some shit. It was like something stupid. So she called me after class, and she's like, I heard you were cheating, whatever. I need you to retake the test tomorrow, in a separate classroom. And I freaked out because I was like, oh, I'm gonna fucking fail the class. It's done. And I just spent the whole day studying, which I probably could have done in the first place. I got a better score than I did the first time. I got an 88 the first time, and then after I got a 95 after studying. And she never could fully say I had cheated, and to this day they never found out for sure, and I got away with it, and I don't think it affected any part of my future life. But I think that was part of the reason that I ended up passing that class. I don't think I would have done as well grade wise without that. Do you think something like that is okay?
So let me get this straight. You cheated, you got caught cheating, then you were forced to retake the exam.
I didn't get caught by her. Like it was like a
but she
there was no proof. Yeah.
Right, but she knew enough to make you retake the exam.
Yeah.
And then
exactly.
you took the exam and you did better on that exam than you did when you cheated.
Yeah, exactly.
So my opinion doesn't change in that regard. It sounds like you kind of are showcasing what I'm talking about, right?
But I guess my question behind that is, do you think like in that scenario, like it was still like unfair to like everybody else, like it affected everybody else in that scenario, in that case?
No.
Like the rest of the students taking the test, did it
no.
affect any of them?
It's not. No. That's not what I mean. But no, in that particular regard, it does not affect the students directly. My point is, when you're contributing to the culture, the cheating culture, which is now a culture, long term it has effects on the curriculum, because as students become more, let's say, quote unquote, productive, but in reality they're cheating, right? The curriculum has to be bumped up to meet that. So let's say not only you cheated on that exam, let's say 80% of the class cheats on that exam, so that everyone's scoring a 90% or higher. That means next year the exam needs to be harder to account, because obviously the exam's too easy. All right, so now the exam needs to be made harder for the next year. And now let's say next year only 20% of the students cheat, and then the majority of the students fail that exam. Do you see how it creates this effect?
I see what you're saying.
That is more. It's like climate change. You're changing the reality of education, and in that sense, your individual experience won't have this profound effect, but the combination of all of these cheating scenarios has a profound effect on how the education system works.
I see what you're saying. I would agree with that sentiment. I think that it's so hard to say at the same time too, because with curriculums changing every year to get harder, that's not always necessarily the case, right? Like, of course, like sometimes, like if you have such a large majority of the class like passing with like these crazy numbers, then that's when you start seeing like investigations happening and stuff like that. With you hear about these like college classes that people are doing so well that the whole class has to retake exams, and then it's unfair to the students that actually did study and take the exam, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my point is, do you think that it's always like the curriculum always has to change to account for cheating is like the right solution?
When you say the curriculum has to change, do you mean just changing the exams, or just like making? What do you mean?
Well, how do you account for, like, because basically you said that like your point before was that classes get harder every year because people cheat, essentially, right? So,
in that specific case, yeah,
well, how do you deal with that over time, right? Like, how do you?
You got to crack down on cheating.
Combat the cheating.
You have to crack down on it. You have to be more. Classes, teachers, administrators, and even other students need to start rejecting this culture of trying to get away with cheating and trying to cheat.
I think personally it's just getting worse. I think it's the opposite's happening, especially with remote classes nowadays.
Of course. No, I'm fully aware of that. I'm saying what needs to be done, not what is happening. This is a sentiment that my entire family shares. It's it's a joke at this point because there isn't being, and then this is why the U.S. education system is one of the biggest laughing stocks in the developed world. It's a joke. It's not real.
Maybe like, I mean, I don't think our college education system is laughed at.
It is.
I disagree with it. We have people travel from all over the world to take classes here.
That's because a U.S. degree is still considered something worthwhile, but people from other countries come to our colleges, and it is laughable. They've said so.
Who is they? Who is they've said so? What does that mean?
We can get into this later if you want, but this is a totally separate conversation. It's something I would encourage you to look into yourself and anyone else who might be curious, but the U.S. education system is not anything that from what I have read and from what I understand and from what I've experienced is nothing to be respected. So
I think our primary education system, you know, like elementary, middle, and high school, is just that. But I think where the difference is between those forms of education and our college system.
No, I would totally disagree with you on that. I think maybe a select few colleges in the country, like Harvard and MIT, yeah. The majority of colleges in this country are not what you're describing.
But those are the. I mean, I would say take that with like what I said with a grain of salt, because of course I think this goes for anywhere. Like you're not like of course you're gonna have the forerunners like Harvard, MIT, Georgia Tech that are like, you know, some of the, you know, produce like, you know, some crazy results, and you're gonna have, you know, schools like I don't even know. So you're gonna have some bad schools too.
I'm telling you, the majority of schools in America should fall under the bad schools category because of how basically how college is just a profit cow.
Yeah,
it's a money cow in America.
I think there are a lot of schools that are for-profit schools and you know, are just willing to, you know, give throw out mediocre professors education and just kind of roll with it and reap in the benefits. But I think there are ways that, you know, students pull from it when they spend that kind of money as well. Like I think you could argue the fact that when you're spending that kind of money, you might make the extra effort to really pull your resources and get something out of it as well.
Well, on the topic of what we were just talking about, we just discussed how that's not true. We just talked about how most people see college as a means to an end, and they'll cheat their way through it to get the piece of paper, no matter the cost. They're willing to spend tens of thousands of dollars for the degree, and that's the culture of America. They don't care about what they're learning in college. They just want the degree because they're promised to get a job. That is the reality. In other countries, it's not like that. You go to Germany and you go to public education or even private education, you're probably going to get a hell of a lot more educated and forced to get educated because you won't be able to cheat because they take that a lot more seriously over there than in America. Especially because the government is paying for your education over there. Over here, they're lining their pockets with whatever's in your pockets. They don't care. That's the reality of the situation.
I think you made two conflicting points there, though, didn't you? With talking about, you know, cracking down on cheating in Germany and their you know, primary schools, and then you're comparing it to our college system that's paid for.
I said private education and public education.
So
I never said primary.
Okay, so public. Okay, let's compare public education. Obviously, neither of us, I think, are experts on public education in another country, right? Like I just neither of us have been through that, right?
Of course, no.
So, have you ever been to a private school before?
I've been to. So just so we understand what the definitions of private school, public education, and private education. School that you pay for is private. School that you don't pay for is public. That includes college or primary education, as you're talking about, like K through 12 or community college. Does that make sense?
I agree with that, but don't you think that like I guess it falls either way with public and private for like universities that have
I
like
been to like
entrance exams
a
and stuff
private
like that?
like school for like middle school and stuff like that? No. I've always been through the public education system in America, and I have to say the public education system from K through 12 is actually decent depending on the school you go to. It's my main qualms are actually with college. The college system in America is a joke. And I'm surprised you haven't you heard about how most countries are way past us in that regard.
In what regard?
In college education.
What do you define as like way past us? Like, what does that mean?
That they are essentially paying, like most developed countries, you don't have to pay your own tuition. The government wants you to learn. The government wants you to educate yourself. And they will pay for you to do it.
Okay, yeah. So you're like, I think a lot of countries in Europe do that, right? Like
most developed countries do that. And on top of that, they actually have an active investment in your education because they realize that you will be the next person to take over the work of somebody who's currently in the workforce. America is still on this.
Doesn't that fall back under the capitalistic argument with being for profit as America is?
What a capitalistic argument.
Like it.
We're talking about education.
Yeah, but when you're talking about profit with education, I mean, if most universities are for profit, and you're saying that most most schools outside the U.S. aren't for profit, then like, right? Like, you'd agree with that sentiment at this point?
Yeah.
So because they're not for profit and they're generally better is what you're saying.
Well, I'm saying that's a big step towards being better, yeah.
So you would disagree, or you would agree that once you bring in any kind of monetary assessment with how college is in the U.S., it completely takes away from the learning side of things for students.
Not necessarily, but over a course of generations, I would say, or not even generations, just decades of trying to improve what it feels like the bottom line in America. Yeah, it has a way of perverting the classroom, 100%. The fact that there isn't a standardized way for students and people who want to get a college education to get it for free by the government is just sad. And while we're getting way, way off topic here, I don't really know why we're still talking about this, if I'm being honest.
I think it's interesting, honestly. I mean, like,
we're getting really far off the ethical debate or ethical question of cheating in school, because now we're talking about the efficiency of school and the actual impact of education in our country.
It all generally falls under the morality of school and profit and all that.
Well, we started with cheating. We started with specifically cheating, and now we're talking about the United States education system versus other countries' education system, which I don't think there's really a question there in terms of which is better. It's been the education system in America has been widely criticized as terrible. So that's why I'm confused why we're even talking about this, because like, for the last at least decade, people have been coming out and big figureheads, I can't name any off the top of my head, but this is something that you can look into on your own, have come out and explained how terrible the U.S. education system is compared to the rest of the developed world. And this is a big reason of why places and countries like China are dominating us right now in education. There's no question in my mind that if we continue down this route and we don't make serious changes and reforms to the education system, there will be no competition anymore with China. China will just claim victory in terms of their becoming a more developed country than us, because they already are in most regards. So it's sad.
It is sad. Let's bring it back in then. Let's move on, and then we'll leave it at that, and we can move on to something else.
Sure.
I generally, the reason I was talking about it a bit is because I just find it interesting to talk about.
I agree. I just think we got a little bit off base. If we want to talk about it more, we should dedicate a whole episode to it, because I actually know some people that are very involved in the education system that'd be interested in talking about stuff like this.
That'd be cool. We should have a teacher, or whoever, I guess, is involved.
He is a teacher. Yeah, he was a teacher, and now he's like he was a vice principal. He actually has a very big rap sheet. But I can talk to him and see what we can do. But anyway, back to
yeah.
So by the way, we're way over time at this point. We spent like 20-30 minutes talking about that. So I'll bring it in on this, and this will be the last question. The ethics of big tech being able to, and when I say big tech, I mean companies like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram is Facebook now. Basically, these social media conglomerates and the way they are able to censor ideas and people individually. Should that be allowed? Is that okay?
It's hard to say. I think it's actually kind of similar to the, in an odd way. It's similar to private businesses with serving customers, right? Like it's the same. It's very similar, I think, in regards to this big private corporation. Whether they're allow certain users on their platform and what they're allowed to do on the platform, right? I think it's similar in that regard.
It is very similar.
I think my opinion still stands very much to how you phrased it before, with I think as a hit all. I think that for the majority of cases, they should be allowed to, pick and choose who uses their platform. And frankly, nowadays, with what the terms of service covers, when you sign up for a platform, you're pretty much signing it away anyways to what you're,
right,
what you're allowed to say.
There is one major difference, though. The private businesses we were talking about are generally small private businesses. Now what we're talking about are giant tech companies that pretty much control the information that you see on a daily basis. So imagine if most news companies, and a lot of news companies already do this, but let's say every news company basically decided what you'd be able to see and what you weren't able to see, right? They expose you to information that they want you to see, and they purposefully don't expose you to information that, let's say, the government doesn't want you to see, right? And they censor you that way. That's a huge problem. And
yeah, I agree. That's a big no, right?
Yeah, right. That's a huge no. So these companies like Twitter, Facebook, they are largely considered a main source of information for millions, if not billions, of people now. This is where the problem lies. Should these platforms now be considered on the same level as a public information source, like the news. And that's where there's a differentiation, where, in my opinion, I'm actually on the side of these companies shouldn't really be able to do that. They should not be able to censor ideas and it's hard to say, but
I think for the most part it doesn't feel that way. At least
it doesn't feel like that to us, because we don't agree with the ideas that they're censoring, so it's okay with them to censor it. And that's where the problem is. Do I think it was funny that Trump got banned from Twitter? Of course, that was hilarious. Do I really think it should have been done? It's really hard to say, because I don't agree with Trump in every possible way, do I think he should not have a platform so I can understand his stance on things, and that his ideas are being censored? It's really hard to say, because his ideas are dangerous. The messages he was putting out there could be risky, but at the same time, it is a form of censorship.
Yeah, and it brings up this interesting argument where, he's moved. I think most of his the information he puts out is on his own website, right?
I got pulled down. Yeah, he gave up on that.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
So, do you know how he mainly communicates with people now?
I think he stopped caring for the most part. I'm pretty sure his personal blog didn't have enough traction, so they decided to discontinue it. I know now he's in a lawsuit with Twitter and Facebook and stuff for the censorship that he experienced. But the main problem is, how would you feel if someone like, let's say, if President Biden, for example, decided to get censored?
It's it depends on the context, right? Like naturally, I think most people would disagree with our current president being censored. I think that it's hard to put two of those same things into the same sentence and see it happen, because when you talk about our active president and not a former president being widely censored on such a
pause, because President Trump was actively censored as president.
On what? Was it on Facebook?
On Twitter. He had many tweets deleted by Twitter,
but not his account banned. He still had an active account.
He had his account suspended at times. I mean, that doesn't mean
was he violating TOS? Was it I don't know what I honestly don't know what I don't keep up with president's Twitter, so I don't really know what the censorship was about. I mean, naturally, if you're breaking some kind of terms of service you agreed with in a different fashion, maybe
Twitter deemed some of the tweets inflammatory, from what I remember.
Inflammatory.
And that could cause inflammatory means something that can cause a reaction amongst people, amongst his followers.
Kind of like what we saw at the Capitol.
I mean, yeah. That was inflammatory. Yes, what he had said at his rally, and then some of his tweets, I'm sure, helped inflame that situation. But likewise, Twitter before that found some of his tweets inflammatory and deleted them. So he was an active president that we didn't really agree with at all, but he was being censored. Should that be okay?
It's hard. It's so hard to. I want to say it's okay. I want to say it's if it breaks TOS on something you agree with, I feel like it makes sense. But at the same time, thinking of it as from an active president standpoint, saying things that are so disagreeable that they become inflammatory. It's just it's hard, man. It's hard to really pick a certain thing, especially especially coming back to the Biden question you asked. You know, what if it was Biden? I very much more so agree with Biden's than I did with Trump. But I'm sure people feel quite the other way with Trump and Biden. So
yeah, you have to.
It's hard to say.
Exactly. You have to take more of a like a macro look at it. You can replace those two names with any two names. Someone you agree with and someone you don't disagree with. Doesn't matter who it is, right? And also you have to remember, the point is these platforms are becoming a point of everyday communication. These platforms have become the speaking squares of the internet, right?
Yeah, it's such an information transfer to everybody, right? It's on the same. These platforms are on the same level as the news at this point.
Exactly. So the idea that there's a TOS that is being enforced by these companies, right? Whereas I could go on this, like on the corner of my street, or go on the university and spout a bunch of ideas that people won't agree with, that would probably get me banned on Twitter. But I could do that over there. Twitter has become a point, is so prolific that the idea is that they shouldn't be able to uphold their own personal TOS because they're so big. And same thing with Facebook, same thing with Instagram and stuff, and all these platforms. They're too big, and they cannot justly enforce their own TOS. They have to enforce essentially the government's TOS. So I'll leave it there because we're already over time.
What time? I'm curious how far. What's our time at?
Hour and 2 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we started this last topic at 53 minutes. Or 52 minutes, something like that. But I'll leave it there. And if you guys have any comments on what we talked about, any of the 3 topics we discussed, we'll drop it in the comments. We'd love to hear what you think about some of these questions. Obviously, we couldn't flesh out everything. And I'm sure we'll talk about some of these things again in another episode. But that definitely wraps up how much time we had here. Do you have any last words, Kevin?
Yeah, I just wanted to say kind of the same thing. Like, please, like, leave a comment and talk about, if there's something you disagreed with or agreed with, and what how you feel about some of these things. I know almost everything we talked about is pretty controversial today, and it's always unique to hear different people's opinions on it. So yeah, I hope everybody enjoyed.
Yep. Thanks for listening, guys. Appreciate it. And as always, we hope that you'll join us for another coffee break sometime soon. Have a great night.